is it possible Australia is reading this article?
Well, the thing is, the Australians, they know the situation. They have a presence in the Solomons and throughout the Pacific in places we don't. And they really do have a good understanding of what's going on. And then there's Australians, and then there's Australians. You'll find ones who have a tie-in with the government will often see things a certain way, and then others on the ground, also on the ground, but without that connection, they will see it a very different way. And you have to listen to both of them. And I don't think the other ones get listened to enough in the Solomons. But the Australians do have, I think, a pretty good understanding of things. But for some reason, I think they're getting it a bit wrong in some of at least the official policy here. And it reminds me a little bit of what I've used that Africa example, but you used to hear, because I've been chastised actually by one Australian friend that I don't appreciate or understand the depth of what they're doing. And as I said, make no mistake, they are present, and there's a lot of effort that goes in from the Australians on the development front and diplomatic front, etc. But he sounded like, you used to hear this a lot in old South Africa during the apartheid era, or in Rhodesia during the colonial era. You hear people say, "Oh man, we understand these Africans. We understand them. You can't understand them possibly, and our Africans love us. Now they love us out there, man." You hear this from the Australians and New Zealanders a lot. The locals, they love us. I did, or however the Australians would say it. The locals love us, and well, not all of them do. They may not quite understand that how they're regarded in a lot of places out there. But it's the nature of things. But for understanding the Solomons, as I say, I don't think enough of the right people have been consulted, and there have been Solomon Islanders who have really been begging over the last few years for the Americans in particular to get involved, to help. And the Trump administration, for all the good things it did, it didn't have enough time to really focus on it. But it's, I look at what's going on in the Solomons, and I tend to see a lot of lost opportunities here. But it's, we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, I know the Trump administration did make an effort to kind of reestablish connections to a lot of these Pacific Island nations. Like there was a lot of efforts in like the Marshall Islands, but the Solomon Islands definitely was not a focus of things. But this also makes me appreciate like the levels of strategy the Chinese Communist Party is using, because at the same time as, they're buying off the Solomon Islands, they're also, their influence in Australia has been a huge topic. How much of this is all playing in together?
You never know. It's a good question. And I'm not devious enough really to understand it. But in a lot of these situations, you will find business interests sort of whispering in people's ears, say, telling a government to take a certain step, take a certain measure, because it's going to restore stability. When in actual fact, there may be a concession that they think they're going to get, if a government does a certain thing. And you can probably read between the lines on what I'm saying, but I'm not going to say anything more than that. But back to the Solomons, just to be accurate, because otherwise we're going to be chastised by Trump officials, is that after the switch in 2019, the Trump administration did prevail upon USAID to allocate a $25 million of aid funds to the province in Solomons called Malaita, which is the most anti-switch, anti-Chinese influence province there is. So the Americans did try to allocate a lot of money to that specific island, a province, to help them out. But I'm not sure how effective that actually was. And the Trump administration, well, of course, how you actually spread the cash around is hard to, that can be a little tricky because there is a central government involved here, and this is a pretty ruthless central government. So they're not weren't probably going to sit back and let the Malaitans become really rich and successful. In fact, as I said, all of this overlays some island-to-island frictions that go back quite a ways. And Malaita versus other parts of the Solomons has been an issue for a long time. But the opposition to the switch to the Chinese influence, that is not just on that one province. It's you'll find it throughout the Solomons. And as you mentioned, Chris, the Trump administration really did a good job in paying attention into the countries in the Central Pacific, inviting their presidents to visit the White House, having Secretary of State stop by. And this was more than every administration before them has ever done. And they did get involved in trying to preempt the Chinese from refurbishing an old naval base in New Guinea as well. So they were the best there's been, as I say, in my lifetime when it comes to the Pacific. But they didn't have enough time to really bring things to conclusion or fruition in a lot of cases.
But is that policy of building up our alliances with these Pacific Island nations, is that a policy that's being continued by the Biden administration and the new Secretary of State Blinken?
I don't think so. I'm sure they would take me to task for that, but I don't think so. What I would say is, well, where's that embassy in Honiara? Where's the plans for it? That's just one thing. They can maybe be forgiven for that because they've got plenty of problems going on. But one specific thing that I would point to is in the Central Pacific, and you have to get out your maps. There are what are called COFA states. What they have agreed. The COFA is an agreement. These three nations, Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands, they reached agreements in the 80s with the United States saying, look, America, in exchange for some aid, for the right for our people to live in America, we will give you defense concessions. You have the right to control or to handle our defense. So you Americans can set up bases if you want, and we will not let anyone else, we won't let anyone else have a defense presence here unless without your permission. So you have these agreements. Compact on Free Association. There it is. That's what the COFA is. And so these are written agreements. And part of the deal is that there's funding that comes with the COFA agreement. And the amounts are not huge. But it's really a payment to these nations for their willingness to be friends with us. And they use it for development, et cetera, et cetera. And the COFAs, the financial parts of the COFAs have to be renewed periodically. And the Americans are digging it's like squeezing blood out of a turnip to get the Americans to cough up the money. And the negotiations they drag on and they're kind of fiercely contested. And the locals don't like it. And the Trump administration understood the importance of getting out the checkbook and writing that check and getting these agreements renewed. The new administration doesn't seem to see that is important. And what are you going to do if you're on the other end? What does that tell you about American interest in you? And as I say, the amounts of money are so tiny. If these guys were African drug lord or Afghan drug lords, you'd probably have C-17s full of cash on the way out in an hour if they asked for the money. But these partners out in the Central Pacific can barely get the time of day from the administration.
I mean, how much money do they want? Are we talking like billions? Or are we talking just like 20 million? Or what's our?
It's like in the maybe 100 million or so. It's like 10 seconds of Medicare fraud. It's not much money. We're not talking these multiple billions that. Maybe what they should do is start developing nuclear weapons, and then John Kerry will arrange for the Treasury to send them a few $1 billion on pallets of cash. But it's not much. It's not much money. But you look at these islands, look at their location, and think about what would you think if some other country was set up there, or their military was set up there? That you'd have some real problems. They're right in the heart of America's Pacific defenses, and they're well disposed towards us. They want us to be there, but this administration isn't, as I say, it doesn't seem to consider it a priority. Certainly not above a national dental plan, it seems. But the one on the bright side, it shows what can be done, is this island, the country of Palau, which is out to the west. It's east of Philippines. But in 2020, they invited the Americans to set up a military base in Palau. And when was the last time anyone invited us to set up a military base anywhere? Well, actually, 4 countries have over the last 10 years, and the American military has declined in each case. And that's in the Pacific. And that's just what I know. But Palau did it. They did it publicly. And you can imagine how popular that made them with the Chinese. And it took a lot of nerve for the president to do it. And I think that a lot of this, I don't quite know for sure, but I think a lot of this had to do with the good work of the American ambassador. There's an embassy in Palau. We have an ambassador, and it was, I think, a very good one. And I think it was a lot of his doing. He would have, I had acquainted with him, and he, I think, would probably give a lot of other people the credit, but I think he deserves more than he's willing to take. And it shows what can be done with the right people in the right places when you show some interest. Is the U.S. military moving out smartly on this offer? I don't get the impression they are, but they should have moved out within 30 minutes of it being made. They just seem to take their time doing things. If you, built a couple of Shangri-La hotels there that people could spend 6 weeks there planning things, I think you might get more interest in these places. I'm being a little cynical on that, but it's key terrain. We've got people who want us there. We need to take more advantage of it, and that goes throughout the region. There's any number of excuses why we don't, but I've never heard a good one. But that's just me.